So Bruce, tell me about who you know in your family is the earliest farmer that you can currently remember.
My dad was the first farmer in our family.
And how did your dad get introduced to farming?
That's what he wanted to do. So he went to the University of Maryland and studied agriculture and came back and started farming.
Do you have any idea, did he ever relate to you if there was an inspiration in the family or a friend that set him on that path?
No, he didn't. He didn't. My grandfather was a bottler in Catonsville, and so I'm sure my dad grew up with that, but then I guess that wasn't for him, so he decided to be a farmer.
So he got out of the what place that he studied in?
University of Maryland.
Their ag program.
Yes.
And what was his next step in terms of following that dream and passion of his?
They bought a farm in Ellicott City, and he started farming there. And he started growing, I think originally he did apples for a while, and then he had a herd of Ayrshire dairy cows and milk cows for a while, and then he transitioned to livestock, beef cattle and sheep and hogs, and laying chickens and raising turkeys for a fresh market that he created.
Well, that was a lot. Let's go back and explore a little bit of that, okay? So let's put you in place now with that. You came along at what point in that process?
I came along after he had transitioned to livestock. So he had a beef cow herd, a flock of sheep, and a farrow to finish hog operation, and laying chickens.
What did you learn about his farming life before you were born? Did you hear stories from your mom or stories from your dad that related some of their memories of that?
Well, my mom grew up on a farm also down in Ellicott City, so she so she knew the farm life, and I guess the one biggest thing I remember, my dad started with horses, and I remember him talking about clearing fields with horses and how to get the stumps out of the ground, and so that was pretty big. But basically, when I came along, then it was pretty much a basic grass farm, obviously with the sheep and the cattle, and even the hogs. The hogs were all pastured at that time.
So when you came along, let's go back to the horse version of the farm. I hear they were used for taking care of the earth, right?
Right.
Where they were not bred or sold or riding horses. I mean, they were,
Right. No, they were draft horses. Right. They were all the horses were used for plowing and tilling and planting and harvest and all of those things. So, and then by the time I was there, the horses were gone, obviously, and he had tractors then.
When he was doing the horses, Bruce, I don't know the time frame. Do you have an idea of the time frame? This would be before you were born.
It would have been in the late 30s, probably.
Okay. So there was water on the farm in the late 30s before you. This is again before you were born. We're going to stick with this for a little bit. This area. Do you remember, or do you know how water came?
As far as I know, they had electric by then.
Right.
I mean, he obviously grew up before electric. I know my mother grew up before electric. When she was a child, she was the youngest of 10, and so her job was to wash all the oil lamps and keep them clean because her hands were small enough to get in there and wash them all. So she grew up without electric, and I remember her talking about an ice house. When they used to cut the ice off of the ice ponds and put it in the house, and it was a big deal if they still had ice when strawberries came in the springtime, in June. And yeah, so one of the stories she told me, they were, she wasn't, I'm sorry, she wasn't the youngest, she was the next to youngest, but one night they said, well, let's have strawberries and ice cream, and her youngest brother took off for the ice house to get ice so they could make ice cream, and he fell in. And they, fortunately, they got him back out, but so I'm fortunate, I'm happy that I missed all of that, and I often think about how did they ever harvest ice. I can't imagine how much work that was to haul ice from a pond all the way to the ice house, put it in, and take it back out. But that's the way they did it.
Now, Bruce, you said you had electricity for the pump. Was it a well
We always had a well.
with electricity to run the pump?
And we had electric, yeah.
And did your home have running water? Like a
Yes.
bathroom?
Yep. Yep. So I was born in 1947, and we had indoor plumbing and everything.
So let's go back to your dad and his horses. Did he ever tell you any stories about that particular part of his life?
No, not a lot. He didn't talk about that part.
Did he have brothers?
He had a brother. His brother was in the Merchant Marine and worked on ships his whole life.
Did your dad have help, farm help?
Always had one man there to help with the work, you know. But it was pretty, you know, it was a seven day a week job.
Let's talk about the size of the farm then. This is before you came along, while he was working with the horses. Do you know how big that farm was then?
The total farm was 375 acres. But as far as cropland and things, you know, like I say, most of it was grass. And the way our farm was situated, we had a farm road. We lived right on Route 40. Actually, it would have been 144 when he started farming, and then they put Route 40 through. So, but from the house to the back of the farm was a mile on a dirt road. And a lot of the time in the summertime was spent picking up stones out of fields and putting them in that road to make it so you could get all the way to the back. And so the beef cows lived in the back of the farm. So every morning you would drive almost a mile on a tractor taking hay and silage to them. And I remember that very vividly.
Do you remember your dad ever talking about having German prisoners on the farm, or even mentioning German prisoners?
They, yes, they went down to the locker plant in Ellicott City and would get German prisoners to come out and help them on the farm. In fact, we still have paintings that those soldiers painted. Still have them in my mom's house. I think there's 3 or 4 of them that they painted. And the old barn that we had there, one of the boards on that barn, on the inside of one of the things, it was painted POW on it. I guess it was carved in there, but it was carved POW. But they said those guys were just like normal people, you know. They were just like you and I. They just happened to be soldiers.
Did your mom relate to them much, do you know?
To the soldiers? She never talked about that. I don't know. I'm sure she cooked a lot of food for them, though, because that was the big deal back then, you know.
So let's stick with the horse version of your dad's farm. Any other stories you can remember in that area that he related to you?
No, I don't remember a lot about that. I do remember that he participated in, they had a stallion program during the war where they bred mares so they could generate horses for the war. But that's all I remember about that.
And he participated in that?
I'm sure he had mares that, you know, I guess they had select stallions that they used.
How many horses, did you ever hear about how many horses he was keeping on the farm?
No, I don't.
All right, so Your earliest memories of being on the farm, is it the same farm that you were born on, that we're talking about with the horses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Brendell Manor Farm.
So on Brendell Manor, along comes Bruce. Is it before or after your brother?
After.
After, okay. So your brother already was getting farm oriented. What was the year's difference between you?
Correct. 4.
4, okay. So he kind of became slightly a model mentor to look at besides your dad. Is that the kind of relationship you saw?
In a way, I guess. Yeah, I probably learned my work ethic from him, from both of them.
Do you remember what the first things that they were teaching you?
They didn't teach you anything. You just kind of jumped in and did whatever they were doing. You just followed the model, you know?
I see that. I do that. What was it? Carrying buckets or saddling horses?
Oh, it wasn't. No, we were past the horses, but whatever, you know, it was feeding. In the wintertime, feeding. In the summertime, obviously, baling a lot of hay, harvesting a lot of hay, gathering eggs from the chickens, cleaning the chicken nest, which was my job, and I hated that job, but
Many chickens?
that's what we had to do. They probably had about 300 hens. And my grandfather had an egg route and would deliver eggs every week to Catonsville and Baltimore. He had, I guess, acquaintances that he knew from living down there that he delivered eggs every week.
Let me try to understand that then. I want to see if this plane's getting closer. It's another parachute jumper again. Every day we could get these guys. You hear the plane?
Yeah, it's on.
It's getting closer. Come on, you know this.
You can't jump planes.
Where is it?
Not jumping.
You'll hear him sweep away when the jump's finished, right?
He used to jump on his dad's farm.
Do you know that about that?
Yeah, he told me, yeah.
I'm certain with the heart. So we're focusing now on your grandfather and his egg business, of which you were young when you began to see that happening around?
Right.
So I'm trying to get the lifestyle of your grandfather and his egg business. So first let's start about where's your grandfather living at that time?
He lived on the farm. The house was a big house, and my grandmother and grandfather lived upstairs, and we all lived downstairs. So they were like separate apartments.
So actually your grandfather at the time he was living was kind of integrated into your dad's farm. He just
Correct.
took one aspect of it.
Correct, he did the chicken part of it.
Did he take care of the chickens or he just moved?
No, he took care of them. He took care of them, and he gathered the eggs most of the time, and did that part of the farm.
How was that set up, the chicken arrangement? You remember much of that?
How was it set up?
Yeah, like it's its own separate building?
Oh, sure. There was a chicken house. You know, it was with a feed aisle in the middle and chickens on each side of it. And every year they would get new pullets and raise them. And we used to have houses which were round that they would put the baby chicks in. So it didn't have any corners because chickens get scared and they would pile up. But these houses were round, so they couldn't get in the corners and smother each other. And I remember one year when we had the pullets out there, they were, I don't know, they were pretty big. A weasel got in there and killed like 30 of them one night. And I haven't seen a weasel, well, I didn't see that one obviously, but I haven't heard anything about weasels since then. But he would just bite them in the neck and suck the blood out of them and go on to the next one.
Did you keep the chickens in chicken yards or did they free range?
Had a big yard, yep, with a big tall fence, and the chickens were always outside. And had trees in the yard, and the chickens would, go out in the shade, and they'd go back in. And I think they were never locked up, I don't think, at night. It's not like, now everybody pretty much, big deal now, chickens, but they didn't lock them up at night. The chickens just knew enough to go inside and stay inside.
Did you help gather up the eggs?
On Saturdays or whatever, yeah, on Sundays I guess I would gather eggs, yeah. Yeah, and we used to have the big egg baskets, and you put them all in there, and he would take them down the basement and wash them off, and he had a wood block with sandpaper on it, and he would sand off any dirt that didn't come off when he washed them, and put them in, candle them to make sure there was no blood spots in them, and then put them in cartons and then deliver them.
How did he get downtown?
Downtown, he drove. He had a car. You know, we had cars back then.
Right.
He'd put them in his car.
He didn't have his own.
Oh, it wasn't a truck or anything. No. He just put them in the car and took them. Because he knew where he was going, and he knew how many eggs everybody usually got. So
So what did it usually take to do his route? Do you have any idea?
Oh, probably 3 or 4 hours.
Oh, a half a day.
You know? Yeah.
Were the eggs packed in a dozen cartons?
He had dozen cartons. Yeah.
Did they say Brendell Manor on them?
No, he didn't have. I don't remember that, whether he did or not.
You were around what age at that time frame, you know?
Oh, I would have been 8 to 12 probably.
Your grandfather passed away on the farm?
No, he ended up, my uncle settled, when he retired, settled in Virginia, and he ended up down there for his last few years of life.
Was he doing any farming down there?
No, he was retired. He'd been retired for quite a while.
Did you ever hear stories about your grandfather's grandfather? Which would be your great-grandfather?
Yeah. No, not a lot. He was a slater. He put slate on roofs. And then somehow, I don't know how, but my grandfather got started in the spring water business in the early 1900s, I guess. Before there was city water, they used to have the big 5-gallon jugs of spring water, and he used to use horses to deliver that all over Baltimore City. And his plant was in Catonsville, and it was called Caton Spring Water Company. And then he started bottling beer for a while, and then they got city water, so the spring water business went out. You know, that kind of did. Nobody. I mean, when I was a kid, you couldn't go buy a bottle of water. Nobody needed to buy water. You know, so I think about it, I'm like, geez, I wish he would have kept that business. You know, that would have been big now. But so he sold that and came out and bought the farm in Ellicott City, which at that time was way, way out in the country. You know, it's right by
In Howard County?
in Howard County. Yeah, in Howard County. It was way out in the country, and he developed a park there on part of the farm, and built a brand new restaurant there and opened that for a while, and had big picnics and that kind of thing at the park, and big entertainment to come in on the weekends.
So he drew a lot of people from Baltimore to come out to have fun?
Correct. And they would have oyster roasts, and we have pictures of a field just filled with black cars where all the people came out to the oyster roast or the crab feast or whatever.
How did he get food for that restaurant?
You know, I was too young to know how he did all of that, but
I think Bruce is being modest about the park, because that was a really big attraction in the county. People came from even states around, when people like Roy Acuff and
when he had the entertainment there, yeah,
yeah,
Happy Johnny and all those.
People came. 10,000 people used to come there.
It's
on
a lot.
Sunday.
Yeah, it was big.
Parking was a problem.
Yep.
So, what was that called?
It was called Brendell's Park. Brendell Manor Park, in fact, is what was the name. And he had, you know, my grandfather was a promoter. He had the banners that you see, the triangular long banners that hang up. He had had them made, and we still have some of them. And he had big entertainment, had a big covered stage, and you know, for the entertainers to be on, and had a park there for the kids with big swings and slides and all kinds of things, and a swimming pool that was was there, so people would come out and do
Pony
that.
rides.
And yeah, I'm sure he did all that stuff too, pony rides and everything. So that was a big deal for a while. And then blue laws got to be in, which meant he couldn't be open on Sunday. And he just had to close it down then.
How long do you think it lasts?
Art may know more than I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm going to say 20 years, but I'm not sure that it was that long.
Probably about 15.
That's still a long time. Did you relate to that park in some way?
I remember seeing it when I was really little, but that was it. It was closed down by the time I was old enough to know much about it.
So you did go to it a lot. It sounds like it'd be a big fun.
We went there when we were kids, but not very much. I don't have a lot of memory of that. I think the whole family was so busy with it that the kids probably stayed at home when they were little.
Yeah, Mr. Carroll also had a little issue with the park because there were so many cars parked up and down the National Pike through Frederick Road that they were starting to park in his
Sure.
his Manor Lane, and he didn't like that at all.
I'm sure.
Well, that's quite a spectacular experience to have in the family.
Yes.
You turned a piece of ground into a mighty happy place for a lot of people to have a good time.
A lot of people. I still see people that, I remember going down there.
Much pictures of it yet?
We have some pictures, not a lot though.
Good to
I
know.
think pictures were expensive back then.
Now, do you know what is at that park today?
The Rosskeller that he built is still there, and it's a community center. And it's pretty much all houses now. It's been totally developed. Other than there was a Charles Carroll College there, and the framework that burned down, I think, before they bought it, I'm sure. And the stonework for that is still there. So if you were to go down there, you could see some of the stonework for the college. And the Rosskeller is still there. Don't know about the swimming pool.
Well, it's not there.
It's gone.
The last building to go in that development was the dance hall, and
Mhm.
the stage on the back of it, and it's the Terra Maria development today. It's a very tight little knit development. And this is 2016, and I do remember that park.
I'm sure you do.
Did we figure out what era that was, the park era?
1940s.
So you came in about towards the end of the park, from when 47 was when you were born.
Correct.
And your brother probably had a lot of experiences.
He probably had experiences with it, yeah.
Right. Is your brother still around?
He's still around. He farms in Illinois now.
So
He
he's
bought
living there.
he bought a farm out there and lives in Illinois now and farms out there.
Okay. So, is this the time? Oh, okay. I'll just see what ours. So, I'm interested in the evolution of your dad from the time he's doing the horses to his next new farm lifestyle. What was that?
Well, then obviously he went to tractors after the horses.
And so did you
And-
see the first tractor get delivered, or?
No, he had them before I was born. You know, that was the stage there.
So you came along, and let's maybe concentrate on the first things you remember, probably 4 or 5 years old. What state was the farm in at that, if you can remember much back to there?
Well, as I say, he had sheep, so there was a barn where he kept the sheep. He had a flock of 30 or 40 sheep. And there were other buildings where all the hogs were. And the big bank barn, obviously we stored hay and straw in that, and the cattle lived down below that. And my dad always had a horse, a riding horse. And the horse stayed in there, and then there were a couple of cows that he milked. So every day he would go down and milk one cow and bring the milk back up to the house, and my mom would pasteurize it, and that was our milk, you know, and we had eggs then and everything. And I do remember him talking about when he had the sheep, there used to be packs of wild dogs around. And for a while there, he would always carry a rifle on the tractor in case the dogs got in them. And the sheriff would come out if he saw dogs in with the sheep, and they would just shoot whatever they were. But there were wild dogs around then that just roamed from place to place. So that was the experience with the sheep part of it.
What was he doing with the sheep? What was the...
Well, wool was a big product back then. So you'd shear them once a year and get the wool, and raise the lambs up and fatten them up, and then sell them in the late spring. Market the lambs, you know. And all those little enterprises went together to make a living, which he did.
So what did you have an interest in then? Can you best describe, of all the, you just went through a whole bunch of different things.
Oh.
The sheep and the chickens and the
Right.
dogs and the...
Right. I guess I didn't have any particular interest. It was just, you know, I did a little bit of everything, you know. When I was really little, when I got home from school, I won't say really little, I was probably 6 or 7. My job was to fill all the water troughs for the cattle at night. You know, and of course, as a kid, you know, you get occupied with something else and let them run over, and that was not a good thing. But there were no automatic waterers, so everybody had to be either carry the water to them, or you'd have a hose and run it. And you know, they kept the barn, it was bank barn, and they would keep it closed up real tight in the wintertime so the water pipes wouldn't freeze. That's the way you heated the barn back then.
How did the electricity get back to your farm? Did it follow the 1 mile driveway, or was it hooked up from the national pipe?
Where'd the lines come?
The electricity.
They came straight across from 144, over Route 70 and straight over.
That's what I figured.
So here you are on the farm, 5, 6, 7, 8. Somewhere along the line, you made that transition from so it's from horses to sheep that you saw that, right? Where you brought the sheep in, or the sheep were already in?
Oh, the sheep were there, I'm sure, by then. You know, I'm sure the sheep were there too. I mentioned them.
Right.
But the beef cows were there, and the hogs were there, and the chickens were there. As far as I know, they'd always been there, but obviously not, but they were.
And your grandfather?
Yes.
Was there. And your brother was there?
Right.
And your mother was there? Right. What did Mom mostly do during that time period?
She did the housework. You know, she cooked, and we always ate dinner in the middle of the day. The big meal was the middle of the day, and everything would stop at lunchtime or at dinner time, at noon, and everybody would go to the house and eat. And if there were people working there, they all came and ate too. So my dad had a grass farm, so he made grass silage, and he would have a custom harvester come in. Ellsworth Linthicum would come in with a chopper and 2 or 3 men, and they would chop grass and fill the silos that we had. And my mom would always have a big dinner for all those men. They would come up and eat dinner at the house in the middle of the day. So that's what she did. She was a cook, a good cook, you know, and obviously took care of us and the clothes, all that, but yeah. And it was a full-time job.
So you only had 2, I think you said 2 cows for milk. So where were you getting your meat during that time period?
You would take an animal to the locker plant and get it processed down in Ellicott City, you know. Or if you wanted a chicken, he would go out that morning and kill it. And she would cook dinner. Yep.
What
You
was your part of
know,
that?
just take it down and help him to pick him. You know, it was just whenever she wanted the chicken, he would go grab one, kill it, and clean it and everything.
What was your method of killing them? stabbing them, ringing their
No,
off their head?
no. I'm told my grandmother used to be able to do that, just wring their neck by twisting it. But nope, just use a hatchet. I hope you didn't get too much blood on you.
On the farm, what did you do for fun or recreation, or when there was time to do it?
There was always time to play, you know. I remember sleigh riding a lot in the wintertime. We used to have really good snows for sleigh riding, and we would go out most of the day sometimes in sleigh ride, and then go back out at night and sleigh ride. You know, it's a lot of work to build a trail back then if you got a deep snow, but we'd get that done and then we'd sleigh ride.
And how did you see it at night?
Moonlight.
Ah. What was a Sunday like when you were little?
Sundays, pretty much the farm didn't do anything other than what needed to be done. Feed in the morning, and then, you know, obviously milk the cow, and then feed at night. But we always went to church. We went to Sunday school. We always went to Sunday school. And Mom would always have a big dinner on Sunday, and pretty much every Sunday, some member of the family came out to visit and had dinner with us. Either an aunt and an uncle or a whole family of cousins, and sometimes they all came, but most of the time it was just one family came. But almost every Sunday they would all want to come out to the farm and have dinner. So we spent the afternoon that way, and city cousins would come out and we would go do whatever, you know, get in trouble or try not to get in trouble, climb in the hay mows, and
So
they
you got a chance to play with, after dinner you got a chance to play with your brother, your cousins, nephews, whoever
Correct.
who was ever there. Do you remember those kind of things that you would do?
Oh, we did a lot of things, you know. We'd go out in the woods and we'd build a lean-to and grab burlap bags and cover it over and make a little campfire kind of thing, work on it. You know, the next time, we wouldn't get it finished, obviously. Next time they came out, we'd work on it some more. We did those kinds of things. That's one of the things I remember. If there was snow on the ground and they got out there, then we would go sleigh riding, obviously. You know, or just go off in the woods and do different kinds of things.
What kind of games did your brother and you play?
You know, we didn't play a lot of games. Chinese checkers was a big one for us, and regular checkers. They were probably the two that we did. And we had bicycles, and you know, you go ride your bicycle all the time. Ride to the back of the farm, back that long road, and ride back in or wherever.
All your Sunday visitors didn't mind coming back your stony, rocky road?
Well, that road was just the farm road. We had a lane. I mean, our lane wasn't very long to get to the house from the paved road.
Where
But
was that, to the park?
No, 40 was in by then. And before 40 was open, yes, it was through the park.
As you got older, did you start to wander with that bike beyond your farm?
No, never went very far away from the farm with the bike. Because by the time I was old enough, I was probably 7 or 8. Turf Valley was starting to be built then. We were right next to Turf Valley, and they were building the golf course then. So, you know, the traffic and things, and they definitely wouldn't let us go down on Route 40 because that was the main road with all the truck traffic that that you see on Route 70 now. So, and that was a pretty dangerous intersection there. There were quite a few accidents there. So we knew to stay away from the road.
What were some of the carnivals that you remember?
Carnivals.
I mean, a lot of the churches had carnivals.
Yeah.
And some were at Brendell, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. Probably we went to some of them. I remember. Well, I guess by the time I was old enough, then the fair had started, so we always went to the fair wherever it was.
Actually, the fair started when he was born,
47.
47.
And I don't know that we went to a lot of carnivals.
You know, Charlie Miller's farm used to have a carnival once in a while.
No, I don't remember ever going to any of those.
Well, so let's carry this farm forward. Is this farm still part of your life?
The one where I grew up? No, no. It was sold in 1960, I think. And we stayed there a couple years and farmed it. And then my dad bought a farm up in Glenwood. And in 67, we moved up there. And so now that's where I farm, in Glenwood.
You're still at the Glenwood farm?
Still at the Glenwood farm,
Did you
correct.
give that farm a name?
Pardon me?
Did you give that farm a name?
No, it's just Brendell Farm.
Oh, it's still continued as Brendell Farm?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how big was that farm?
That was 300 acres when he bought it. And so we're still there, and I have 2 sons there now. So.
You've been working those 300 acres for a while then?
Yep.
So when Dad went there, what was he doing in terms of the farm operation?
Still doing most of the same things. The chickens were gone, the sheep were gone, but he still had hogs and still had the beef cows. So we moved up there, and then we got bigger and bigger into the hogs and the beef cattle part of it.
Well, prior to going to the new Brendell farm, or the current Brendell farm, I didn't hear how the beef cows transition came out. I still see him in this world of sheep and 2 milking cows. Do you know much about how he made that new farm change?
Well, he always had beef cows and the sheep and the hogs. The 3, and the chickens. We had all of those things.
So in the new farm, you dropped the chickens and the sheep.
And the sheep, and took the hogs and cattle with us, and then beef cattle with us.
Do you remember how those animals got from one farm to the other farm?
Oh, he had a truck. You know, it's a lot of trips to get them all there. But yep, they all moved up there. And
All of them very willingly, right?
they were happy. They had plenty to eat, so they were always happy, you know.
So
During your lifetime span, what tractors do you remember from then to now that you had?
Oh, man. He was an Alice Chalmers guy, so he had a Alice Chalmers WD and a WC, and he had an International H and a Ferguson. And the first new one I think he might have bought that WD new, but then he bought a John Deere 420 from Ramsburg's down in Ellicott City, so that was the new tractor we had. And you know, they were it. So he baled all the hay and did everything with those couple of tractors.
Dad stayed on that farm for a while? I guess I'm talking about when did he pass?
Oh, he stayed there, yeah, until 2006 when he passed away. He was 92 when he died. And he was still out, up until 2 years before that, he was still out in the fields, raking hay or doing little things or growing a garden.
Till he was 90, he was out in the field.
Correct.
That's wonderful. Did he ever relate to you about wanting you to continue with the farm?
He just knew that we would. He knew that my brother and I would stay there and farm. You know, I mean, we worked together all the time. You know, I mean, every day pretty much we saw each other because he lived at the farm and my brother and I lived not far from the farm, but we were obviously there every day and all day and 7 days a week. So.
What age group was this for you?
Pardon me?
What age group was this for you?
Oh, I would have been early 20s.
So now, that farm, you continued. Did your brother continue to stay with you?
He stayed there, and we farmed together until 2000, and then he got bought a farm in Illinois, and he moved out there.
Wow, that's strange.
Yep.
Why was he drawn to Illinois?
He'd always liked Illinois. Flat black dirt. You know.
Ideal soil for
Yep. Yep. One of our obnoxious jobs was picking up stones out of the fields when you plow them. And out there are no stones, so maybe that's why he wanted to go there. But it's just, you know, out there, it was an ideal place to farm. You know, the soil's rich, it's flat, you don't worry about hills. And he wanted to go out there, so he was able to do that, and he's very happy being there farming.
So that must have changed things for you, because all of a sudden...
Yeah, from 2 to 1, right. Right, you know. I always figured if one person can do X on a farm, 2 people can do like 3X or maybe 4X, especially if they know what they're doing and know how to work together. You know, because, pardon me?
What did you do then?
I learned how to do it, and I had 3 sons who were teenagers, and they helped out with it in the summertime and were around in the evenings and all and helped out. And we got it all done. From when we moved up there, we expanded a lot. We built a grain system and started to feed a lot more cattle. And we got up to where we would feed 500 cattle at a time and built a new confinement hog system and kept 300 to 400 hogs all the time. And no-till came along at that time, and we were able to farm more ground that way. So we farmed a lot more ground, and that produced an excess of grain, so we built more grain bins. And so then we had a big grain system, and that was a big part of it, the harvest, you know. And things transitioned then. When we moved up there, we were still harvesting ear corn, and did for a few years. And then we went to shelled corn, and that just changed everything because it cut the labor back so much. It was all mechanical then instead of handling that ear corn, which was a big deal, you know, and eliminated the work of it. Because when we were kids, that was one of our jobs in the summertime, is we got to ride the combine and bag the wheat or barley, whichever it was. And so, you know, you had a combine with a 6-foot, would cut 6 foot of wheat or 6 foot of barley. And on the back of the combine, there was a platform where you would sit and bag the grain and tie the bags up. And when you get to the corner of a field, you'd dump them off. And when you got done the day, you'd go around and pick all the bags up, put them on a wagon, take them into the barn, dump them in an elevator, put it in the granary. And so that was your day. And then in the wintertime, you'd shovel all that grain out of that granary, bag it up again, load it on a truck, take it in our case, to the mill in Sykesville, unload it all, get it ground and mixed into feed, put it back in bags, take it back home, unload it again, and then take the bags and feed it to the hogs or the cattle or whatever. So it was just a lot of work, you know. And if we were taking ear corn, which we did a lot of the time, you would shovel that into an elevator and load it on the truck. And when it started out, we didn't have a dump bed on the truck, so you had to shovel it all off the truck to grind it. So it was just a lot of work, you know, and that's what we did.
What time period?
That would have been in the late 60s. Yeah, in the late 60s, because I could drive and go to the mill and get grain then, and I would have been 16, 17, 18. So, you know, it was a lot. And
you've seen a lot of
just
changes in your time.
Yeah, and just to, maybe, I don't know if you want this in your tape, you're going to edit it, but back then, everything was in 100-pound bags. All the feed was in 100-pound bags. And we just, you know, we load a whole truckload of 100-pound bags and throw them up over your head and stack them on there or whatever. Now, you know, I think they're even down to 30-pound bags a lot for consumers or whatever, but not many people now would handle 100-pound bags anymore. You know, even, you know, my sons are big, strong boys, but I'm not sure they want to handle 100-pound bags like we did and load a whole truck. But that's how much it's changed in that, you know, just in that one little area there. So that took up a lot of our time.
So what I was looking for here is, Bruce, is a comparison between as much of the early days to now, how you perceive that.
Well, like I just explained, the amount of labor that we did to do something, you know, and now when we don't have much livestock anymore, but when we were feeding a lot of cattle and a lot of hogs, it was all mechanical. We had an electric mill that ground the feed, mixed it, and it got augered out, and you mechanically fed it, you know. So that part's gone. But what I see now is the technology is changing so much, you know, and I was often think about that. In 1992, I bought a fax machine. That was like the latest and greatest thing there was. Paid $1,600 for it. And, you know, I mean, that's what the price was. And I think in 98, bought a computer for $3,600. And it was I probably got more computing capacity, and, you know, we all do in our phones, way more than what that was. But that's what it was back then. Now that same, you know, I mean, nobody uses a fax machine hardly anymore, but now you can buy a copier fax printer for $200. So the technology is making all of those things way cheaper. But on the farm side, the technology is making everything that we want to buy more expensive. So our farm equipment cost is going up a lot. And, you know, I don't know if that'll change one day to where the technology is cheaper then, but it's not. It's very expensive now. You know, I think our combine may have, I think the mechanic told me 20 or 30 computers in it. Everything, you know, everything, fuel injection in the engines now, and you pretty much can't figure anything out without having a program and a laptop to diagnose what the problem is, especially with the engines. So it's just changed that much, you know.
What has no-till done for farming?
No-till was the biggest evolution probably going in this area, in the east probably. You know, there's still a lot of tillage goes on. In the Midwest, they still do a lot of tillage. They tried no-till, most of them have gone away from it. But here it allowed us to farm and cut our labor down, number one, and cut down the soil erosion tremendously. You know, when you plowed all these fields and you had to do really small fields and contour strips and that kind of thing. And that's gone away pretty much with no-till. And we've gotten our yields to come up equal with, well, I think they've always been equal with conventional tillage around here.
How about the expense of no-till machinery? Need bigger?
Well, you need less equipment with no-till. You know, you don't have to have the tillage equipment that you used to have. And it's way cheaper. It's less trips over the field. So it is cheaper if you can control the weeds and do those things. That's always a challenge, but it still seems to be working very well. And it's going, you know, it's going that way more and more. So we're getting pretty efficient. We're getting very efficient about things now. With the no-till, you know, the fertilizer stays where you put it. We're cutting back on our fertilizer amounts and getting that more fine-tuned, and using less chemicals than we used to use.
Yeah, what is your opinion of Roundup, both good and bad?
Roundup?
To kill the weeds before you...
Oh, I don't have any negatives about Roundup. Roundup is, was the one that allowed no-till, well, one of the ones that has allowed no-till to continue as long as it has. And we don't use it exclusively now. There are other chemicals we can use for burn down and that kind of thing that we don't need Roundup anymore in certain cases.
Because I remember when DDT was the cure-all for everything.
Yeah.
And then on to the outlaw.
So you go to the fair, Howard County Fair, and you participate, or you just as a visitor?
I am on the board of the fair, so I'm active in the organization itself. No, we don't show anything anymore. We don't exhibit at the fair, but you know, I'm active in the fair.
You're walking to or from your fair, whatever you decide to visit, and a young kid comes up to you and he says, "Aren't you a farmer?" And you're going to obviously say yes, but he's going to say, "I'm thinking about getting into farming. Do you have any advice for me?"
Yeah, find a job on a farm, even if you work for nothing. See if you can find someone that'll let you work with them and learn as much as you can and figure out what you want to do, maybe different kinds of farms. You know, there's all kinds of farming you can do now, and don't have to be a big farm. You can be a small farm, you can part-time farm. Lots and lots of people part-time farm, have a full-time job, and still, if they do crops or things, or even animals, do that, you know. So sure, there's plenty of opportunities there. You know, don't think you can go out and make a living farming the first year you go start up. But yep, it's a great life, you know. Agriculture is a great industry to be in, and it's changing really fast. And you know, if you're energetic and you're smart and you work at it, there's a good future in agriculture.